Hey, subscribers to Without Diminishment. Alexander Brown here, co-founder, managing editor, back here for another episode from our BC Leadership Series. We are thrilled to have Caroline Elliott, one of the co-founders of the publication. She is on leave, reiterating that. We're being impartial here to hear about her campaign, to hear about her platform, to hear about life on the campaign trail. And so if you enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe on YouTube, on Substack. We'd love to have your support. Enjoy this chat. Caroline Elliott back on the show. Caroline, we miss you at Without Diminishment.
Miss you guys too.
Yeah, it was like sending you off to school. You haven't come back yet. It's we're proud of you, but you have become such a big deal here in such a short time in British Columbia. Politically, you're one of our co-founders. You're part of the BC Public Land Use Society, Aristotle Foundation, now a candidate for the leadership of the BC Conservative Party. What's it like from going from talking about, the political ecosystem to being a part of it?
Well, I miss writing. I do. But you know what? It's been replaced by a whole different world of just being out there, standing up for what I believe in a very different way, getting out there in front of people and trying to bring them along, meeting with people all the time who've been waiting for the message I'm delivering, which is very similar. And in fact, well, we've been aligned obviously on it in the formation of Without Diminishment. It's been a message people have been waiting for, and you guys are seeing that success in terms of your readership and your ability to retain that readership. And I'm seeing it in my ability to draw people to big events and get them excited about it. So it's kind of like doing the same thing in a different way.
Yeah, it was funny to be. I attended. I've been popping into disclosure, of
Mhm.
course. First and foremost, you are on leave from the publication, so
Of
I'm not. I
course.
won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure we're trying to be impartial. I've been attending quite a few events. We look forward to continuing to expand our leadership series. We're inviting
Mhm.
everybody on in the nature of fairness, and because we want to hear from them, share that with our subscribers. But yeah, I saw you at a West Van campaign stop where the whole restaurant was booked out. There was hundreds of people, and it
Mhm.
was it was it was fun to see you walking around shaking hands, going like, "That's our gal. That's our co-founder." I used to be able to get time with you. Now I'm waiting with 200 other people. So things have changed.
No, but you know what the cool thing is at those events, and it's happening truly everywhere I go, whether it's in West Van or Smithers or yeah, we were in East Van last night, and the number of people who show up at those events and are saying, "I've never turned up to an event like this in my life."
Yeah.
Some people tell me they've never voted in their life, but they are at this moment now where they realize, I think it has struck them how much is at stake in this coming general election in terms of where BC's at. I think it's a do or die moment, frankly. And that in turn makes this leadership race a do or die moment in terms of like maybe not do or die, that puts it maybe too starkly, but in terms of the turning the trajectory around in this province and the choices we make, it's like a crucially important thing to be a part of right now.
Yeah, I noticed it's anecdotal to my own brain, but I noticed like a real cross section of support at your campaign event in West Vancouver, where cross demographic, cross cultural, that I
Mm-hmm.
think speaks to the fact that we realize this is put up or shut up time for the left coast. I've seen similar crowds from other candidates as well, but it almost is cutting across partisan lines in a way right now, where it's the mud hut wing of the NDP, and then it's the BC Conservatives. There's obviously a third party influence there as well, but if this country is going to recover, if it's going to get back on track, the left coast is Canada Strong and Free this year is labeled as conservatism's new frontier because in some ways
Mm-hmm.
it is, especially this year. It's like we're a main character. It's like if we don't get it together, Canada might not get it together. Projects don't, get to the coast. The land use problems
Mm-hmm.
could seep east. And on the land use file, you've obviously been well positioned and well ahead of the curve on land rights, where land acknowledgements seemingly end up. These alarming and unprecedented deals that continue to be struck behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the DRIPA issue resonating with the public to such a degree?
Well, look, I mean, it's something I've been talking about for years and years. I mean, I first started talking about these kinds of issues in 2009, believe it or not,
Since
when I was
before
talking
it was
about
cool. Yeah.
before, way before it was cool, before a drippa was a glimmer in anyone's eye. Uh, but I think I've been long worried about the trajectory we're on this file in particular, because if you follow it through to its ultimate logic, you realize like it just doesn't really work. And what's made it very real for people, I think, is the Cowichan case coming down and people realizing, oh my God, my home, my private property rights are genuinely put into a great deal of uncertainty.
Yeah.
No matter how much people try to downplay it, that is just the reality of that decision. And then, of course, there's other related things like DRIPA, which I have, again, been speaking about for a long time. And DRIPA in particular, I mean, it's incredibly, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, in case people aren't aware of that acronym, it really has been a platform for the NDPs. It's been like a means of pursuing the NDP's highly anti-prosperity agenda. It's another means that they use to put up roadblocks to economy building, paycheck creating development in this province. They're signing all kinds of land use agreements all over BC that are fundamentally undemocratic under the banner of DRIPA, that place public decision-making over public land and resources into the hands of governments that the public does not elect.
Yeah.
That's obviously very problematic. That's very related to my academic research. And then it's, of course, like super socially divisive, like just constantly dividing us as a society into, uninvited guests and colonizers versus the rightful owners of the land, as the NDP have literally done, standing in the legislature using those exact words. Like, do they think this is going to work? Do you think this is going to mean true coming together and building a bright future together? Like, it isn't. It's hard to understand their motivation, but it's something that I've been standing against for a long time, and I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah, I saw even today, we're taping this on Thursday, this Quiquetlum agreement, might be mispronouncing that one, Quiquetlum, but the NDP MLA in the riding has like I saw a tweet from you as well, as she's said that she's on unceded land and this is stolen land, and you're going, well, that probably doesn't bode well for a reasonable resolution there.
No, it doesn't. And it's actually really wild to be looking at. So that Coquitlam issue, there's a current Aboriginal title claim being made on that land right now, just as in the Cowichan case. So this is the level of gravity of this situation. And you have the actual NDP MLA for that region where that claim is, saying in her Twitter bio, I'm a settler on unceded Coquitlam land, like, meaning the First Nations land. And like, this kind of ideological, like, land acknowledgements are innocuous and they mean nothing. Words actually mean things. And if they don't, you shouldn't be saying them. Yeah. So what is it that you mean by those words when you are the representative for that region, when you're saying that land is unceded during an Aboriginal title claim? It's incredibly risky, frankly, when it comes to how the courts interpret that kind of information. I'm not saying that Twitter bio is going to end up in a court case, but it's a mentality that is expressed again and again by this government that is undermining our very ability to defend the public interest in these court cases.
Yeah. More so with, words ending up having consequences, this sort of progressive mission creep in some ways. Crime and chaos. It's sadly been turned into sort of part of the furniture in modern progressive Canada, very much in British Columbia and the Lower Mainland. In a particularly terrible instance, Melissa Blimke's killer was just handed a reduced sentence due to his ethnicity. Where do you stand on race-based sentencing, the factory of excuses seemingly used to avoid punishing our very worst? And how would a Caroline Elliott government, if so formed, propose to deal with this growing problem of entropy and institutionalized disorder?
Yeah, I mean, race-based sentencing, just as a starting point, has got to stop.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous, this idea that people are somehow less culpable based on their race. I know, like, frankly, there's a lot of Criminal Code of Canada stuff there that's outside of provincial jurisdiction, but a Caroline Elliott government would stand up and say, we, as a province, oppose this. It needs to stop. It is meaning that somebody like Melissa is not actually having justice done to what happened to her, and her whole family having to watch this is ridiculous. Even the details of that case are actually really wild if you read it. Like, this guy grew up in Toronto until he was 25 years old. And it says right there in the wording, he didn't experience any particular racism. He grew up with lots of people who were also Black in his case around him, and it wasn't really an issue. And when he came to BC at the age of 25, then he started feeling a little bit isolated because there weren't as many, again, if you just read the case, it's talking about there weren't as many people who were Black around him, I guess. And so therefore, ... racism.
Yeah.
Therefore, reduced sentence. It's like the incredible gymnastics they're trying to do to even make this make sense should tell you everything you need to know. Like, people who do bad things should go to jail. People who do good things shouldn't. Race shouldn't come into it. And I have to say, like, there's even things in BC that are even more crazy. Well, maybe not more crazy, but as crazy. Like, do you know that there's a race-based handcuffing policy by the VPD in place?
No.
That says that police officers should take into account the marginalized status of the people they're arresting to decide whether they should handcuff them or not. When isn't the most important thing on their mind just whether or not they pose a physical threat? Shouldn't that be the only thing they're thinking about?
And if they're talking handcuffing in BC or in the downtown east side, that might be someone with very little frontal lobe left who's lashing out and should be in Riverview or should be institutionalized so they can actually get better. I couldn't imagine looking to something like that. I guess drawing further on the road to where being paved with supposed good intentions, I recall an article of yours in Without Diminishment about this very topic. SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity. We know it's being pushed in the classroom. Most rational adults would agree that's inappropriate and seemingly being driven by far left activists in place of empirical data, the support of parents, the actual needs of developing hearts and minds. Where do you stand on SOGI?
Yeah, we need to end SOGI. And, and thank you for asking, because there seems to be some confusion about my position on that.
I saw a little bit of that, so I figured I'd...
Yeah, no, thank you. I've talked about it in the past several times and said the same thing. And look, like, it has come to symbolize a level of serious broken trust between parents and the school system. Like, every parent sends their kid to school thinking, how is my kid being set up for success in the world? Are they reaching the educational outcomes they should be? Are they being taught in the right way? Schools are not a place to be having conversations that are better had between parents and children within families according to the values that they hold as families. And that's just really important. The thing that drives me crazy, though, like, to get there's SOGI, there's also like just this habit of like denigrating our past, of telling kids that we're just a terrible country full of bad people, when in fact, as you know, like, millions of people want to come to this country all the time because actually we're a pretty great country.
And are proud of it.
Yeah. And focusing on, the school system constantly focusing on the wrongs of our past and never on our collective successes. Telling kids the land that they stand on doesn't belong to them. You add up all these different aspects of ideology that have just been jammed into the education system by the NDP. And then you realize that, like, outcomes in what kids are supposed to be learning are falling, like literacy, mathematics, like science, like, to the point where it's years behind where it was just a decade or two ago. So it's like most parents are actually really done with this. And I hear it in every community I go to. And it's why we just need to say we are rooting out the ideology from the education system and we're getting back to core basics.
Yeah. What's like a provincial lever that you could pull there? Because like I'm in Kitsilano, I'm in Vancouver, so it's like I'm aware that some of the school boards might be a little bit kooky by the standards of center to center right characters, across the country. Like, what piece of legislation provincially can change? Like, where could the BC Conservatives really assert themselves there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things we can do, but I think one part of it is curriculum development and the fact that the curriculum itself is being developed in an incredibly activist way. And to be clear, I am not advocating for conservative ideology in the school system either. I think the school system should be incredibly, like, neutral in that sense, like in a political sense. Yeah. It's just we're not anything close to neutral right now. And the funny thing is with education too, is like it's one of those things in polling that shows that, if your kids are in the school system, people really care about this issue. And then either before or after, people just really don't care about education. And I guess I'm here to say, and I say this everywhere I go, people should care about what's being taught in our schools because we're talking about a whole generation of future citizens going out into the world as the product of the system. Yeah. And, when we're telling them that there's nothing to be proud about as Canadians, for example, in our history, like, that's not positive for our society.
No, whether it's the universities where obviously the ideologies can lean particularly left, or I think of the issue we have right now, with some of our judges, with some of these light sentences, where everyone has an excuse. We're ignoring past principles because so and so 2 generations back had some little checked grievance that now they're back out on the streets and doing it all over again. And so if you got to start it early, seemingly. Part of what we talk about it without diminishment is maybe post Pierre Trudeau, if there's been this kind of march through the institutions that have changed them so robustly to culturally liberal or increasingly far left. How do you cultivate common sense? How do you get the right people into the right positions? And seemingly, if we want to be productive and get out of our own way and stop defenestrating on certain social causes and in an unhelpful manner, it starts in the schools. It starts young. And so the young conservatives, conservatism is growing. The base is changing demographically, fascinating to see, particularly out west, where there is a young group of activists that have kind of brought the BC conservatives to the position they're at now. Mm-hmm. The topic on their minds often when it comes up is immigration. I understand that provincially there's a different rule there, but it's a pocketbook issue. It's a pocketbook issue particularly, let's say, if you're under 60. And I'd love to afford a home one day. I'd love to have a family doctor. I want to see a little more cohesion and shared identity out there. Let's say less TFW fraud, less dodgy schools. What would a Caroline Elliott government ask of the federal government? And where would you seek to better assert yourself on behalf of working British Columbians?
I'm glad you asked this question because it's one of those ones where it's so easy to pass the buck provincially as the NDP has been doing. Yeah. And what they say on immigration is, oh, it's a federal issue. There's nothing possibly that we could do here. In fact, there's a lot that they could do here, and there's a lot they should have done that they didn't do. So aggressively, assertively is maybe a better word, assertively standing up for the provincial interest in the face of objectively bad policy is something they should have been doing and something that I will do. So when we were seeing those numbers that were completely unsustainable from an immigration perspective coming in from the federal government, where was the BC government saying, stop, you're straining our healthcare, you're straining our transportation infrastructure, you're straining our education system, you are putting far too much pressure on the housing market. Is a huge part of the housing problem that no one ever even wants to talk about is the supply side that was driven almost exclusively by high immigration, that we were building 1 unit for every 5 new arrivals in Canada. So the provincial government's silence on this, I think, is quite unforgivable. So there's that piece of it. And making sure that, and I want to demand as a provincial government that we have some say over the immigration that comes to British Columbia, similar to what Quebec has, and say,
Alberta,
look,
increasingly.
Like this works for BC, this doesn't. Yes, let's bring in some doctors. We clearly have a need there. Let's bring in some nurses. We clearly have a need there. But do we just open the doors and just have, huge inflows in that we can't sustain? Of course not. We can't do that. The other side of it is I do think there's a values piece to it as well, like a cultural compatibility piece. Do you love freedom? Do you love tolerance? Do you believe in equality between men and women? These are things that we actually should, I know it's controversial to say this. It shouldn't be controversial to say this, but we do need to say that actually that is a lens we should be putting on to immigration. I've written about it in the past. I believed it then and I believe it now.
Yeah, you were ahead of the curve on that too. I remember reading that piece on values in the Hub. Mm-hmm. No, it's the integration. It's not just the numbers we can support. I think that is maybe an easier political message for some to put out there, but we have to return to a number that we can support in the sense that all can get along, all can talk, all can learn from one another. I even just think of the little. I live in a neighborhood that is certainly a sort of mixed demographically, which is great. But Vancouver puts on fireworks for everybody but Canada Day. We do this wonderful international celebration, and then on Canada Day, everyone just sits on their thumbs at home, and it's just going proudly be unabashed. So many of our proud recent first and second generation immigrants, like they came here because they loved Canada, they loved its
That's right.
history. They didn't believe we were a genocide state, and we're not. And so I think on values tests, you're totally over the target. I digress because we like to talk about culture here. So
Hmm.
perhaps reluctantly, I should do you a solid and say, hey, the economy. The recent budget was obviously a disaster, as NDP budgets tend to be.
Hmm.
What would the high level plan be on your end? If able to form office, what's Caroline Elliott going to do financially to get this? I mean, golly, like, even the past NDP leader, now deceased, our financial situation was in a much better position. But how do we start to undo some of the damage of the David Eby years?
Yeah, and I think a common misperception about our founding mission with Without Diminishment was, people would say, oh, these guys don't think the economy matters and they only want to talk about cultural stuff. And our
Yeah,
position has always been the economy matters incredibly. A lot of people talk about it, which is why
yeah,
we're going to talk about the thing that fewer people talk about
yeah,
on the culture side. But I think we all recognize how crucially important the economy is, how crucially important fiscal responsibility is. They may not get people jumping out of their chairs and excited to go out and vote, but my God, they're like incredibly, nothing works in a province that has a stagnating economy.
yeah,
We have seen our GDP per capita literally shrink over the past 2 years. We've seen our economic growth projections like significantly lower than our long-term average. Like these are very worrying things. And I have to tell you, it's real. Like when you go to somewhere like Merritt and you're sitting across the table from someone who hasn't worked in a year or two, or have had to pull up their whole family's roots and move somewhere else to find a job because, their mill shut down. Like it's real to people. They're feeling it every day. It's not some abstract thing that it may feel to some people. So it's always top of my mind. And look, there's a few things we need to do on the economy. One, we have to repeal DRIPA because it is creating so much uncertainty on the land base. I talk to investors all the time. I'm talking
yeah.
to people in the development industry. I'm talking to people across all different natural resource sector areas. And they're all telling me the same thing. They're not putting money in BC. They're BC-based businesses that are not putting money in BC because it is so concerning from a certainty standpoint due to things like DRIPA, due to things like the couching case and the finding of private property rights. So just though it's linked to the economy in a very meaningful way. So we need to repeal DRIPA.
Yeah.
We need to get back to properly arguing in favor of private property rights in the court, which David Eby has prevented government lawyers from doing. And then more broadly, we need to look at economic enablement. Like we have a situation where 5 jobs have been created for the public sector for every 1 in the private sector. Like private sector is where wealth is generated. The public sector is where wealth is spent. Like we need to have more on the generation side. So that means making it easier to do business here. It means doing a serious red tape reduction effort to make sure that we don't have all this unnecessary, burdensome permitting process that actually isn't serving any real end. So there's a lot we can do. I mean, we have an incredibly uncompetitive tax structure. We have, there's so much coming down the pipe on that front. Obviously, it's a huge burden on the fiscal side too, because when you don't have those revenues, then government starts trying to find new ways to tax people to make up for it, which also has negative effects on the economy.
Yeah.
So it's not simple, but there's some pretty big things we have to do right off the bat on that front.
Gee, you don't sound like a secret liberal after all.
I know. Who'd have thought, hey?
Yeah, that's pretty fiscally sound, fiscally conservative, socially. We know where you stand, and we miss having you at the publication. Yeah, Caroline, it's been great catching up with you, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you for having me.